In the small, humid coastal city of Tagbilaran, where the air always smelled faintly of salt and diesel smoke, there stood an old McDonald's that time seemed to have forgotten. The paint on its walls was cracked and sun-faded, and the once bright golden arches above the door flickered weakly, as if struggling to stay alive. Locals said the branch had been built in the late 90s, when the city first began to modernize, but over the years it had lost its shine. Now, it sat quietly at the edge of the Manga Highway, half swallowed by tall grass and shadowed by palm trees that creaked in the wind. Trucks and tricycles still passed by, but rarely did anyone stop there after dark. Rumors whispered through the neighborhoods that people who went for a late-night meal sometimes didn't come back. It was on one stormy Thursday evening when Carlos Dela Peña, a 19-year-old delivery boy from a nearby barangay, found himself stranded outside the restaurant. His delivery bicycle, rusty, borrowed, and overloaded with bread, had broken down in the rain. Water poured down from the dark sky like a punishment, soaking his thin clothes until they clung to his skin. With no phone signal and thunder echoing through the mountains, he spotted the faint light of the McDonald's sign blinking ahead, like a dying beacon. He pushed his bicycle toward it, his shoes splashing in shallow puddles, unaware that every step was leading him closer to something far worse than the storm. When he reached the glass doors, he noticed how quiet it was inside. No chatter, no laughter, no clinking of trays, only the low buzz of the fluorescent lights. The air smelled of old grease mixed with something sour, like spoiled milk left too long in the sun. Carlos hesitated, but the rain behind him was merciless. He wiped his face and stepped inside. The doors closed with a soft suction sound, and suddenly, everything felt too still, as if the place had been waiting for him. Tables were neatly arranged, yet a few trays still had unfinished meals, cold fries scattered beside empty cups. The soda machine hummed quietly, though there were no customers to serve. At the counter stood a lone worker, an elderly man in a faded red uniform, his name tag reading Cemon Calwell. Locals called him Cemon Calwell, a strange nickname that came from his slow, trembling voice and the way he often mumbled about feeding time. His face looked pale, tired, and stretched with shadows under his eyes. When he saw Carlos, he didn't greet him with the cheerful "Good evening, sir," that most fast food staff used. Instead, he whispered, voice hoarse and cracked, "Don't stay after closing, boy." Carlos blinked in confusion, unsure if he had heard correctly. The man's eyes darted toward the kitchen door, a heavy metal door that shuddered once, as if something inside had moved. For the first time, Carlos noticed the smell coming from that direction. Not just grease or meat, but something metallic and rotten. The storm outside roared, and thunder rumbled like distant growling. He told himself it was just the wind. But in the pit of his stomach, a quiet fear began to rise, the kind that makes you want to turn back, even if you don't yet know why. Behind the counter, Cemon Calwell, or as the townspeople mockingly called him, Cemon Calwell, stood like a statue, his wrinkled hands trembling as he gripped the edge of the counter. His eyes were hollow, sunken deep into his face, as if sleeplessness and guilt had carved permanent shadows beneath them. The faint glow of the fryer light flickered over his greasy uniform, illuminating the crusted stains that had long stopped looking like ketchup. Carlos, dripping wet and shivering, forced an awkward smile and asked if he could wait inside until the rain slowed. Cemon didn't answer immediately. He just stared at the kitchen door, his mouth opening slightly, as if listening to something Carlos couldn't hear. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible, dry, cracking, and trembling like old paper. "You shouldn't be here," he muttered. "It's almost time." Carlos frowned. "Time for what?" he asked, his voice echoing faintly through the empty restaurant. That was when he noticed the sound, a deep, muffled thump from behind the kitchen door. It wasn't the rhythmic hum of machinery or the hiss of a fryer. It sounded alive. Heavy footsteps dragged across the tiled floor, followed by a wet, chewing noise, slow, deliberate, and horribly human. Carlos took a step back, his heart pounding. "Is there someone else in there?" he asked. Eamon's lips tightened. He didn't look at Carlos. Instead, he whispered, "They get hungry if we don't feed them." A shiver ran down Carlos's spine. Before he could ask another question, the lights flickered violently, plunging the restaurant into momentary darkness. When they came back on, the open sign above the door was gone, the neon letters now read PN, the O completely shattered. The rain outside pounded harder against the glass, making it impossible to see anything beyond the glowing reflections. Carlos's breath fogged in the cold air. From the kitchen door, a slow creak echoed as it began to open. Out of the shadows emerged something wearing a McDonald's hat, but it wasn't human. Its limbs were long and slick, bending at wrong angles. The uniform it wore was torn, soaked in dark stains that looked far too fresh. Its grin stretched unnaturally wide, revealing rows of sharp, uneven teeth. The creature's eyes were small and milky white, yet they seemed to lock onto Carlos instantly. In one skeletal hand, it dragged a small Happy Meal box, the cardboard torn and dripping with something thick and red. The smell that hit Carlos's nose wasn't ketchup, it was metallic, raw, and sickeningly sweet. Eamon's breathing grew frantic. "Don't look at it," he gasped. "Pretend you're not here. Pretend." But it was too late. The creature tilted its head, the McDonald's hat slipping off and landing with a wet slap on the floor. It sniffed the air, its grin widening as it stepped closer, the sound of its bare feet sticking to the tiles. Carlos froze, paralyzed between disbelief and horror. His mind screamed to run, but his legs refused. Somewhere, faintly, the restaurant's speakers came to life, crackling before playing the jingle in a slow, distorted voice. "I'm lovin' it." Carlos forced an awkward smile at Cemon Calwell, trying to shake off the uneasiness crawling up his spine. The old man looked like he hadn't slept in days. His eyes were sunken, his hands trembling as they clutched a mop that left streaks of dark water across the tiles. "Sir, can I just wait here until the rain stops?" Carlos asked politely, but Cemon didn't answer right away. He just nodded stiffly and muttered, "Stay by the counter. Don't go near the kitchen." The way he said it made the hairs on the back of Carlos's neck rise. There was fear in his tone, real fear, the kind that can't be faked. The fluorescent lights above them flickered twice, casting brief shadows across the walls. For a moment, Carlos thought he saw something move behind the menu board, something tall, hunched, and wrong. He rubbed his eyes, telling himself he was just tired. The rain outside slammed against the windows in angry sheets, while thunder shook the ground beneath the building. Somewhere deeper inside the restaurant, a machine clicked on by itself, a fryer maybe, or a broken fan, but the sound that followed didn't belong to any kitchen appliance. It was slow and wet, like something chewing. A sticky slurp echoed faintly, then stopped. Carlos's chest tightened. "Kuya, is someone else working tonight?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. Eamon's eyes widened, and he leaned in close. "No one," he whispered. "It's hungry again." Before Carlos could ask what that meant, a sudden thump came from the kitchen door. Both of them froze. Another thump, louder this time, like something heavy hitting metal. Then the door handle twitched. Carlos stepped back instinctively, but Cemon just stared, whispering prayers under his breath. The smell grew stronger, a mix of raw meat and rot that made Carlos gag. Slowly, the kitchen door creaked open. The flickering light revealed something crawling out, a figure wearing a McDonald's cap, but its body was twisted, its skin greasy and pale like melted wax. Its mouth stretched impossibly wide, full of uneven teeth that glistened in the dim light. The thing's uniform hung in tatters, soaked in something dark that dripped onto the tiles. Carlos couldn't move. His legs felt frozen, his mind screaming for him to run. The creature dragged a half-eaten Happy Meal box across the floor, leaving a trail of red smears behind it. Its head tilted sideways as it sniffed the air, making wet, guttural noises. Eamon grabbed Carlos's arm and hissed, "Don't breathe. It sees movement." But it was too late. The creature's eyes snapped open, glowing faintly yellow. A long, raspy sound escaped its throat, half laugh, half growl. The old man pushed Carlos behind the counter and grabbed the mop like a weapon. "Run when I say," he whispered shakily, his voice cracking. Carlos's heartbeat thundered in his ears as the monster lunged forward, teeth clashing, the sound of bones and metal clattering through the silent restaurant. The golden arches flickered again outside, once bright, now red as blood.